Hello. All right, in this presentation, I'm going to try and very swiftly take you on a journey through the evolution of representation in art, okay? In essence, how we got from paintings that look kind of like this to paintings that look kind of like this. All right, and so as you watch this presentation, think about how these are issues that you should probably be thinking about in your own approach to representational art in this class and in your own personal artwork. Okay, so in essence, starting around the 14th century in Europe, art begins to look something like this. What we might call realistic or naturalistic, okay? And it continues along that path for centuries, really uninterruptedly until the mid to late 19th century, okay? All right, so 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, 18th century. About the 18th century, artists are sick and tired of this approach to art. It has essentially gone stale, and it has gone stale for a number of reasons. Essentially, if depending on where you are in your history classes, you may have started to learn about the Industrial Revolution. Okay, the Industrial Revolution begins in the late 18th century in Europe. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but essentially, life begins to be transformed to a degree never before seen, never seen since, and at a really rapid rate. Okay, so Europe goes from being an agricultural society to an industrialized one. We get the advent of modern medicine. We get the introduction of the locomotion. We get mass communication. Huge changes. Okay, these changes, the artists must confront these changes. As life changes, artists begin to feel like art needs to change, okay? Because art has been, once again, going along this relatively same path of representation for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, basically since the late Middle Ages, okay? One of the huge inventions that artists must confront is the camera, okay? Here we have one of the earliest photographs and then an actual photograph of an early photography studio, okay? The camera is huge because up until this point, painters had been the makers of images, okay? But now we have this new product of the Industrial Revolution, the camera, that can produce images more accurately, more quickly, and far more cheaply than an oil painter can, okay? Photography is quickly followed by cinema, which now not only can we have accurate images, but we can have moving images. We can have images that unfold over the course of time, something that painting really struggles to do. Okay? And then finally, a little bit later on, we have Sigmund Freud's ideas about the unconscious, about the interpretation of dreams, and then on another scientific front, the discovery of cells. Essentially, what we have here are the discovery of worlds that we had not previously been aware of, worlds within our own mind, okay, and then worlds within our own body. This causes artists to want to paint some of these new worlds, worlds that cannot be easily seen with the naked eye or seen at all. Artists begin to look inward and start to understand that perhaps the world as we see it before our eyes is not what we should be focusing our artistic efforts on anymore. All right, so 18th century, remember, art looks kind of like this, but this just seems irrelevant anymore to painters. So they begin to experiment. Basically, the Industrial Revolution opens up new possibilities for artists, okay? This really begins with the Impressionists, who start to let the paint be paint. You can see their brushstrokes. They're no longer, they don't feel like they need to convince people that they're looking at an image of real life, okay? Because photography's already doing that. This moves on, then they move on to a group of artists called the Post-Impressionists, such as Vincent van Gogh. In essence, Van Gogh begins blending the objective world that he can see with his eyes with how he feels as he paints that world. So we start to get For example, the scene out of the window of the insane asylum or the mental asylum where he spent the last years of his life. And we get this sort of swirling psychedelic sky, okay? Kind of him showing the way that he felt at that time. All right. We get Van Gogh's friend, sometimes enemy, Gauguin, who starts manipulating colors, departing from reality with color, making colors uh, cause us to feel certain things about the figures and scenes we look at, perhaps altering colors to communicate symbolically. Also, he starts manipulating scale, space, essentially giving us a kind of montage or dream landscape rather than just a still image. He's also incorporating, sort of merging mythological stories with reality. And then finally, a painter, another post-impressionist called Paul Cézanne. Um, he lets the paint be paint like the Impressionists, but he also, while he paints traditional subjects like landscapes, still lifes, and so forth, he starts flattening the paintings, okay, so that they are sort of en route to becoming abstract. He also changes colors. He almost always makes whatever is in the background in cool colors, whereas whatever's in the foreground he alters to be in warm colors. But perhaps most importantly, this is another painting by Cézanne, he starts to introduce the idea of painting multiple angles or multiple points of view within a single composition, okay? So at first, this might look like a very straightforward still life painting, but I want to point out that he's giving you multiple points of view. If we look at what's happening on the left side of this table, it seems sort of tipped forward toward the canvas compared to what's happening on the right. Okay, this bowl of cherries, we're kind of viewing it from above, whereas the peaches, we're viewing them from kind of across the room. Okay, and perhaps this vase is somewhere in the middle. So Cézanne is rejecting the camera. Cézanne would say the camera does a terrible job of capturing the human experience, okay? Because humans are not machines. You can take a snapshot let's say, at your birthday party, but that is in no way going to really even get close to the memory of that entire party, that experience, and whatnot. So Cézanne embraces the idea that we move in space and that time and space affect our memory of a scene. Okay, so he's trying to, in a way, capture time and our movement throughout space in a still image. It's a very strange thing, but these are ideas that the Cubists, people like Pablo Picasso, are going to pick up in the early 20th century and take it a lot further. Okay, and they're going to wind up doing things like this. These are early Cubist paintings. Okay, later on, Cubism becomes something of a style more than an ideological approach. The early Cubists, Picasso on the right and Georges Braque on the left, they were collaborators. They really invented Cubism. And their basic idea was this. Like Cézanne thought, the camera fails to capture the complexity and richness of human memory, of human experience. And the only way that painting can do that is through fragmenting the scene. Okay, they were not fragmenting the scene just to be new, original, strange. They felt like that the only way to do what Cézanne was beginning to do was to really break up that scene, give us many points of view, little bits and pieces of a memory. All that should be in one painting. So, for example, this painting by Braque on the left is called The Portuguese. The inspiration for this painting was a night that Georges Braque saw a Portuguese guitar player play on a dock. Okay, so knowing that, if you look at this painting, I think you'll probably start to see bits and pieces of a guitar player, perhaps bits and pieces of the kinds of things you might see at a dock, such as a steamship, perhaps stenciled letters that might be on wooden crates ready to be shipped, ropes, that kind of thing. Okay? So, representation is far more complex than just painting or drawing things the way they look to the human eye. In one way, I think you could argue that that is an absurd endeavor. Okay? It's not that it can't be worthwhile, but it is not very rational considering that we have cameras. And today, we all have cameras in our pockets. Photography is inexpensive, so we don't need to be able to draw or paint to capture the world around us like we once did. Okay, so starting in the late 19th and early 20th century, artists were trying to figure out what painting and drawing can offer regarding representation of the world that photography or cinema cannot. Okay, and these are issues that we should still be struggling with today. And I hope you will consider all this, and hopefully you found some interest in here and greater insight into why and how we wound up with paintings like this in the early 20th century. And perhaps it will even form some of the artwork you see in the 21st century.